Could you imagine what it would be like if you had absolutely nobody in your life, and on top of that, you were completely helpless? I just went to go visit a patient at a nursing home. I went to her door and it was closed, and it's usually open. I knocked on the door, nobody said anything, so I cracked it open and they said patient care. It means that they're either changing the resident or giving the resident a bath or changing their clothes. So I closed the door quickly and said, okay, I'll come back. And I noticed across the hall that there was this guy that was looking at me. And I went to go visit another patient that I was going to see there, and he was down there sitting in his wheelchair asleep. So I touched him on the shoulder. He didn't wake up. So I went back to go wait at the ladies' room for them to get finished. And when I walked back by the guy across the hall sitting there in the wheelchair watching TV, he was looking at me again. So I walked in the room and I said, hey, how you doing, man? I said, you need help with something? And he sort of looked down at his shoe, and I said, do you need me to put your shoe back on? His shoe had come off his foot. He was just sitting there in the wheelchair, like I said. And he said, yeah, please. I knelt down and his foot was completely turned sideways. So, I was sort of doubtful of whether I could even put this shoe on his foot. But they were Velcro New Balance shoes. And I knelt down and I unvelcroed them, pulled the tongue up as high as I could. And whenever I'd done that, I sort of tried to put it on his foot. And I could tell there was no way that the shoe was going to be able to go all the way on his foot, but it had stopped right there. So I said, hey, is that good? And he said, yeah, that's good. So I Velcroed it back up, and I just sat down on the bed and started talking to him. His name is John, and John was born in August of 1960. So John is 63 years old. This past August, I can't remember what the exact day was, 4th maybe, but in August he turned 63. And I sat down and started talking to him, and I asked him how long he'd been there, and he said a few months. And he said before that he was in Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff is sort of a rundown little town. It's not a desirable place in Arkansas to live. It's relatively close to Little Rock. The crime rate is extremely high. But he was at a nursing home there. And before that, he was at Sherwood. So Sherwood is relatively close to Little Rock as well. In fact, Sherwood is pretty close to where I live in Bologna. He said that he was he worked on computers. He had a degree in computer science. He worked for the Chevrolet place in Sherwood for 8 years. He had built put together their computer system, and after 8 years he went to work for the VA because John was also a veteran. So he did computer stuff for the VA, and he said that he stepped on a roofing nail. It messed up one of the tendons in his foot, which I believe him, but it sounds ludicrous to me that you could step on a roofing nail and it would cause your foot to be turned almost completely sideways. Just imagine if you turned your right foot to the inside and was walking on the side of your foot. That's the way that his foot seemed to be permanently in that position. But I'm not calling him a liar. It's just hard for me to imagine. And also, people in those places, they sometimes get their stories mixed up, but that's what he said. He said that the VA told him that he would never walk, and there was a man that, I don't know if he was a physical therapist or what, but there was a man that worked with him and actually got him to walking again. And one of the biggest obstacles in John being able to walk, he said, was that he was afraid that he would fall. And the guy that was helping him and encouraging him ended up going to Afghanistan. He was in the National Guard, and he lost contact with him after that. He knew his name, and as I sat there, I said, well, I could probably look him up on Facebook and tell him, because the guy just really meant the world to John. And then I got to interviewing him, asking him questions, and he said that both of his parents were deceased. He said he had been married, but he's not married anymore. I don't know if his wife left him or if they're divorced, which would sort of be the same thing, obviously, or if she passed away. He didn't say. He said he does have a sister. As far as he knows, he has a sister. Last he heard, she was living in Nashville, but he has not talked to her in at least 20 years. I said, well, did you and your sister have an argument or a disagreement, or did y'all just sort of drift apart? And he said, well, we just sort of went our own ways and drifted apart. So he hasn't talked to her in 20 years. His parents are dead. He doesn't have a wife, but like I said, this guy's 63, and even though I asked him, I said, is your foot your only physical problem? He said yes, but you could tell he was a little bit mentally delayed. In his legs, his little old legs wasn't but maybe about that big around, even all the way up to his thigh. So he probably has some underlying medical problems as well as the foot. Malnutrition, maybe, something like that. And he was wearing an adult diaper. So he said that when he was at the Pine Bluff nursing home, which he really spoke highly of the place, he got a girlfriend and asked her to marry him, and they used to take them on trips to the movies or out to eat in different outings. Some nursing homes do things like that. It's difficult for them to do because most of them are understaffed, but he said that they really enjoyed it, and he enjoyed being there. Well, his fiance that he had at that nursing home, he said she died. So at this point, the only family that he has is that one sister, and he don't even know anything about her because he hadn't talked to her in 20 years. Everyone else is gone and out of his life. And I got to thinking about that, looking at him in that nursing home room with bland walls. The only furniture in there was a hospital bed, a wheelchair, and a shelf with drawers that was built into the wall, and he had a pair of shoes sitting up there, and a TV on the wall, and that was all of his earthly belongings. He has no one, and he can't even take care of himself. He had his original teeth, but they were so dirty. There was stuff all in his teeth. And I felt so bad for this man. And I thought to myself, one of the best ways that you can minister to someone is if you put yourself in their position where they're at. Some people would look at John and say, man, better him than me. I'm glad I'm not in that kind of shape. I'm glad I'm not him, and just sort of go on with their life. But with me, I don't know why, but I always put myself in John's place and say, what would it be like if I was John, if I had nobody? And you know what? When I did that, it was sort of scary. it's sad, and it was sort of scary. And I was just like, man, I wish that I had the time to come up here and see this guy at like once a week. Uh, because there's a lot of people out there like that. And the reason why I shared this story, it, let me jump back real quick. But one of the ways to minister is to put yourself in that position. But not only that, another wonderful way to minister so that you minister with your heart, uh, provide a service to somebody, have sympathy or compassion on somebody, is not look at John as some dude in the nursing home. But guess what? Guess what? Guess when my dad was born? My dad was born May the 12th of 1960. He's almost the same age. I guess John would be just a few months younger than my dad. So when you minister to somebody, you don't look at them as they are. You look at him. I would look at John as if I was John, or look at John as if that was my dad sitting there, or vice versa. Across the hall, if that was my grandma, if that was my grandpa, if that was my sister, if that was my child. That's one of the ways you get a burden to pray, is pray for somebody else's child as if it was your child, or somebody else's mom as if it was your mom. It's just so sad that people were out there. And yes, I did. After I talked to John for a pretty good while, I said, "Are you a Christian?" And he said, "Yes, I am." He said his dad was, I think, went to a Baptist, and when he got old enough to go to church, he went to a Methodist church. And I know, folks, I know what the Methodist church is. I know what they believe, but I also believe that somebody can get saved, and I believe somebody can be saved in a Methodist church, and I hope that for John. It does us good not to hide our head in the sand and say, well, I hope things get better, but to put ourselves in their positions and have a burden for those people. So the reason why I made this video mainly is to ask you to just say a quick prayer for John, the man that has nothing, has nobody, and can't take care of himself. And he's sitting in a nursing home in Conway, Arkansas, and the only human interaction he gets. I'm not saying anything bad about the nurses or the CNAs, because there are wonderful ones out there. I work with some wonderful ones, but there's a lot of them out there that hate their job, and because they hate their job, they hate the residents, and they don't care about them. It's the way it is. So pray for John. I went across the hall, and I was able to visit with that other lady, and she just sort of lays there. She hardly ever gets out of bed. She lays there and she stares at me with a deer in the headlight look. And I played, you know what song I played? I played This Old House for her. After I finished, she looked at me and she said, "You know what? That song is so true. One of these days we're going to get out of here." She got it. She listened to that song. She looked at me like she was confused, but she got it. And you just never know. I'm telling you, folks, if you're out there and you're watching this and you've got some spare time on your hands, you may, the law of sowing and reaping, a lot of the seeds might fall on the bad ground and nothing come to pass. But if you visit a nursing home and you go from room to room asking to share a Bible scripture, asking to pray with somebody, take a little gift, go to the Dollar Tree, buy a few gifts, and take them and hand them out, you can find that one, and that seed will fall on good ground, and you will bless that person. Or like me, visiting with John blessed me. It gave me a greater appreciation for my life and it gave me a burden for somebody that I didn't know, and it opened up my eyes to realize, even though I knew it, once again, that there are people out there that need me, not patting myself on the back, and they need Jesus. This morning, went to go see Brother Morris. He didn't even come to church yesterday. Larry's funeral, he couldn't even make it to Larry's funeral. He's going through chemotherapy. He's trying to fight this cancer. Doctor's appointments all the time, and he's got fluid on his lungs. He don't ever complain, but he said that this fluid buildup, he's afraid he's going to get put in the hospital and they're going to drain it off, and that means he's struggling. There's folks that are out there struggling. So for us, for you that are watching, that you're blessed and you've got family, you've got a job, you've got the ability to walk and talk and drive and all those things, let's use what we've got and be a blessing to someone else. Another guy this morning, he lives down the road from Brother Morris, and I go in his house, and there's a hospital bed. He's in the hospital bed. The lower part of his back, all the way down to his legs, was hanging off the bed, and the bed was propped up right, and his neck, the back of his head, was touching that part that was propped up. He was laying there like this. His pants were unzipped, his diaper was showing, and he was wearing a sweatshirt that was all pulled up in the back. So at some point in time, he was sitting upright, and he fell or scooted or something, and he was stuck there. I walked in there, and he couldn't move. There'd been no telling how long that he'd been laying there. He had this pill planter that probably held, I don't know, 20 some odd pills. It had fell in the floor. Pills was everywhere. He had candy, homemade Christmas candy was on the floor. It was a disaster. I had to pick him up. I had to get behind him. I had to pull him up, and it is difficult. I don't have very much experience with this, just a little bit of things like today, but it's hard to move somebody around in a bed. It's hard to set somebody up. It's hard to move somebody's legs. If I hadn't have come, there's no telling how long that he would have been laying there like that. I know he needs to be in a nursing home, but he don't want to go to the nursing home, and I can't really blame him. But there are a lot of needs out there. So I want to encourage you to find a need and fill it, because you don't have to be able to play the guitar, preach the gospel, quote 1,000 scriptures. All you need to be able to do is be present with somebody. So I want to encourage you to let the Lord use you to minister to someone today. This is Chaplain Reese signing off. I just made it home.